He stood in the rain with his duffel bag, the same bag he had carried through the deserts of Iraq and the mountains of Afghanistan, but now he wasn't a soldier, he was just a man with nowhere to go. A decorated Marine war hero, the kind of man whose chest carried medals that told stories of sacrifice, courage, and brotherhood, found himself being turned away from a motel because there was no room. His weathered face showed no anger, just the heavy silence of someone who had carried too much for too long. And right there, on that street corner, as the neon vacancy sign flickered in bitter irony, his life was about to change forever. If you love your mom and dad, hit that subscribe button and show some love to her, because what happens next will prove that respect, loyalty, and sacrifice are not just words, they are actions that echo louder than any speech. The man's name was Daniel, though most who knew him in service called him Steel, because no matter the mission, no matter how heavy the burden, he never broke. Daniel had served 20 years in the United States Marine Corps, deployed 5 times, and saved lives in moments most would never survive. Yet now, with aching bones and scars both seen and unseen, he walked into a small-town motel hoping for nothing more than a warm bed for the night. The woman at the desk looked at him, at his duffel bag, at his uniform jacket worn thin from years of use, and shook her head. Sorry, no vacancy. But Daniel knew the truth, he had seen through eyes trained to read people, trained to spot lies in a heartbeat. There were rooms. She just didn't want to give one to a ragged, aging veteran who looked like trouble. He simply nodded, thanked her, and stepped back into the rain. That's what the Marines had taught him, never beg, never complain, endure silently. As Daniel sat down on the curb outside, the rain dripping from his silver hair, he thought about the countless times he had given his men a piece of his rations, the nights he had gone without sleep to guard his brothers, the times he had carried wounded Marines on his shoulders under enemy fire. He thought of those who hadn't come home. And now, here he was, in the country he had bled for, being told there was no room. Yet life has a way of testing the strong, and just when it seemed the night would break him, headlights appeared in the distance. A military Humvee rolled to a stop, and then another, until 12 Marines stepped out into the rain. Daniel recognized the faces, some older, some scarred like his, men he had once led into battles overseas. They didn't say a word. They didn't need to. Brotherhood doesn't always speak, it acts. One by one, they walked past him, dripping wet, their boots striking the pavement like thunder, and entered the motel. The woman at the front desk looked up in shock as 12 Marines in silence stood in her lobby, their presence heavy, their silence louder than shouting. Not a single word was spoken, but the message was undeniable: if there was no room for their war hero, then there was no room for anyone. The motel owner, a man who had been hiding in the back, came forward, his face pale. He had underestimated the weight of loyalty, underestimated the force of respect that Marines carried even outside the battlefield. Wait, he stammered, we have a room. We'll make it work. The oldest of the 12 Marines stepped forward, his eyes cold but steady. You had a room all along. You just didn't see the man who earned it. The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, the keys were handed over. Daniel was offered the best room in the house, but he didn't smile, didn't celebrate. He simply saluted his brothers who had come for him, those 12 Marines who showed up without a phone call, without a signal, drawn only by the invisible bond that never dies. That night, as Daniel sat in the quiet room, he thought about what had happened. For years, he had questioned whether his sacrifices mattered, whether his country still remembered the blood and tears poured into foreign soil. But as he looked out the window and saw the silhouettes of his Marines standing guard in the parking lot, refusing to leave him alone, he knew the answer. Respect isn't given by institutions or by polished speeches, it is carved in the actions of those who stand by you when the world turns its back. The story didn't end there. Word spread through the town. The next morning, veterans from every branch began arriving at that motel, some in wheelchairs, some with service dogs, others just wearing caps with the names of battles long past. They came because one man's story had lit a fire. They came because they knew what it meant to be forgotten, to be dismissed, to be told, no room. The motel, once just a business, became a symbol of something far larger, a reminder that war heroes don't fade quietly into the night. They carry the spirit of a nation that sometimes needs to be reminded of its own backbone. Daniel didn't ask for recognition. He never had. All he had wanted was a bed and a roof for one night. But what he got was something far greater, a living proof that the brotherhood of the Marines, and the respect of those who understood sacrifice, was still alive and unshakable. That night in the rain, he had stood alone. But by dawn, he stood surrounded, not because he demanded it, but because loyalty answered without being asked. And that silence of 12 Marines walking into a motel spoke louder than 1,000 speeches ever could. So when you see an old veteran, when you see a man whose body carries scars you cannot see, remember Daniel's story. Remember that respect isn't about comfort, it's about action. And sometimes, the strongest words are the ones never spoken. And now I want to ask you, from which part of the country are you watching this video?